Hello and welcome back to Let's Paint in iRacing. Once again, this is Dave, and I'm glad you can join me for this not so late night edition of Let's Paint in iRacing. Today I'm going to try to keep this episode a little bit short. I had a long day, big presentation, just sitting back, relaxing with a little bit of tequila. And I just want to keep this a short one. We're just going to do a few things and probably try to keep it less than 20 minutes. So let's just get to it. So off camera, I went ahead and did a little bit of looking and found a couple of things that I was saying I was going to find last time, one of which these evil little headlight pieces right in here. I did a little looking around and they are in fact right here. So we're just gonna grab our pen and like that. And the second thing we're going to fix is something that we didn't last time and also took me a little bit of hunting around off camera to find. This little piece, oops, right back here. Like I said, I wasn't very satisfied with this last episode, so I went around looking a little bit and found that piece to be right here for some reason. So we're going to grab our black and like that. Nice and easy. Turn the mask off. Save it and just take a look. Beautiful. Nice and clean. And if you've noticed there, I saved a little bit of differently. Thanks to Mr. Dylan S. on the forums who pointed me into looking into using action groups. And I've now set up an action group to save my files automatically, so now I no longer have to do the Control-Alt-S, go down here to TGA, select the file, hit OK, then refresh the paint scheme. All I have to do now, so you can see it's got the wireframe on now, all I have to do now is press a shortcut. Let's turn the wireframe off, press a shortcut, come in here, hit refresh, and bang. And it's done, and I'll show you how to do this. Thank you so much for pointing this out. I knew these things existed before, but I never really bothered to look into them too much. And now that I know how they work, just wow, thank you very much for telling me. This will make things so much easier. So I'm going to show you how to do this right now. Really easy to set up. So you can activate, I have the actions panel right here under my colors, swatches, and styles right here. You can turn it on under Window. The Actions is right here. The default is Alt F9. So you open that up. You can see if you look down here, I have one. Where'd it go? Right here. It's called Rough Track. And that's the one I set up to save this file. So I'll show you how to set this up. Really, really easy. Looks like you'd have to set one up at the beginning of every single time you start painting a particular template. But takes 30 seconds to set up. It's going to save you a ton of time, a ton of effort, lots of key presses. So I'll just show you how to do that. So I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to delete it. So it's now this shortcut no longer does anything. It's really easy to set up. You just click anywhere in here. You click on the right here, create a new action. It's going to say, what do you want to call this action? We'll call it Rough Track Save as TGA. There's an option here for a function key, so it gives you one of the F keys you want to set, whichever one you want to set to save this file. I'm going to put it as F2 because some of these keys are bound to things for fraps and I don't want to touch them. Then it's going to give you the option of Control Shift or Shift and Control. Control works fine for me, so this particular function will work when I press Control F2. Then you hit record. Okay, and what this does now after you hit record is it saves everything you do, all of the different options and changes that you make to the image or the file or saving or whatever. It records all of that. and then it basically, when you press this shortcut, replays them all. So I'm going to hit record, and now the little record button at the bottom here has turned red and lit up, which signifies that this is now actually recording. So now I'm just going to basically go through all the actions of saving this thing as a TGA. The counter for some reason has come back. I thought I turned that off, not a big deal. File, save as. I'm in the directory still. I'm going to scroll down to TGA. Now, whatever you do, the most important thing I found when I was testing this out is to not double click this file. If you do that, it'll try to save it as a copy. Instead, go down here, select this. You don't need to change anything because this is the file you want to save it as. Select it and hit save. It's going to say, do you want to replace it? You hit yes. Now you make sure it's set to 24 bits per pixel compressed and hit OK. And then you hit stop. Now you can open up this group and it'll tell you everything you've done. Save as TGA format, 24 RLE compressed in the directory with copy. So now if I press Control or Control F2, it'll basically just replay that and save it. As you can see, the one I had saved before didn't have the wireframe on. The one I had saved just now theoretically does. I hit Control R to refresh the paint scheme, and we have the wireframe. So this is going to save you some time, a lot of key presses, and you can use it, as you can see, for all sorts of stuff. You can use it to make a whole bunch of sepia tones. What else do they have here? To add vignettes, to blacken out pictures. None of this is really applicable for iRacing, but for other things for sure, definitely useful. So that is setting up actions. The second thing is someone on the forums, I'm sorry I forgot exactly what your name was talking about using different strategies in order to produce this particular angle. And yes, you are absolutely correct. There's a whole bunch of different ways of doing this. The way I did it, basically the reason I did it was because I was lazy. A different way of going about doing this, see this layers are this guy here and then the triangle, which is this guy here, okay, would be, let me just make a copy of that, would be, instead of doing under the stroke options, I have the stroke set to position outside. So basically all it's doing is going on the outside of this path that I drew with a round brush and stroking it out. If you set this to inside, you can see now it's a nice sharp point, because now instead of going around the outside of this path, it's going around the inside of this path. And in this crook here, because it's going in, it comes to a nice sharp point. Both the blue comes to a nice sharp point and the white comes to a nice sharp point. The reason I didn't do this, like I said, essentially because I was lazy. When I originally drew this, I drew it with respect to where the blue was supposed to be, without thinking ahead to where the white was supposed to go next to it. So if I wanted to use this technique, I would have had to draw this whole thing a little bit bigger, and then go back and just add that stroke in instead of doing this particular technique. Same result, multiple ways. That's the one thing that's kind of great about Photoshop, is you can achieve the same result a million different ways, and there's no right way or wrong way of doing it. There's just different ways of doing it, and you're just going to have to find whichever way works best for you and run with it and just kind of go with it. And yeah, it's whichever way you find most convenient for you is the way that you should be doing it. So all I did there was just color in the door handles. Haven't actually worked on adding this stroke here to it yet. We'll do that in a later episode. I don't want to get into too much stuff today, but there's your door handles. And I said I was going to cover masks today. Don't know if I want to do that particularly today. What I'm thinking today is I'm just going to do the polka dots. I'm just going to rough the polka dots in and maybe just color the mirrors. Nothing too crazy, just because I don't really want to do too much of this today. Frankly, I had a really long presentation and I'm a little bit sick of talking right now. So I'm just gonna do a tiny bit of work on this and then enjoy the rest of my delicious tequila. Okay, like I said, mirrors are up here, so I'm gonna make a new group. We'll call them mirrors, and click a bunch of times. That's a bad habit to get out of. Using the Control F2 is a lot quicker. Okay, mirrors are done. Maybe I'll play with the colors later. We'll see how everything plays at the end of the day. I'll also do these end plates. Why? Because why not? I have the color up, so might as well just go ahead and do them. Bang, done. I'm not going to be painting right now these guys right here because I'm going to be using pieces off of a add-ons file created by Matthew Nethercoat, which he's got some amazing pieces here, as well as decal stamp layers to go over the numbers. So I'm going to be using them, so I'm not worried too much about this stuff and this stuff right at the moment. So just going to do a couple little things. Now let's just get these polka dots on. And I think after we get the polka dots on, we'll call it at that. So the polka dots. Now these can be a little bit tricky because there's a lot of them and it can get very tedious very quickly. And I want to try to keep relatively faithful to the organization and spacing of the polka dots as they exist right here. So what I'm going to do is I just opened up this file. It's a somewhat completely side-on shot of this car. And on here, I'm going to make a new group. I'm going to call them polka dots. Now I'm going to go here. I said you're going to be using these, and we're going to be using them now. I'm going to go to the shapes option. I'm going to go to the ellipse tool, and I'm going to select the color white. Now if you click and drag with the ellipse tool, you can draw a circle or an ellipse. There's no constraints on how you can draw this particular shape, which is not what we want because these are circles. And you don't want something that's somewhat kind of a circle but not really a circle. And you don't want to sit and go back and change them all after. So what you'll notice, there's one thing about Photoshop you need to know, is that if you hold the Shift key down while you do anything, it adds some sort of constraint onto it. In the case of rectangles, ellipses, and rounded rectangles, it adds the constraint of turning these things from rectangles and ellipses into squares and circles. So if I hold down Shift and drag, you can see I can go left and right. It doesn't change anything. This thing remains a circle, so it constrains the horizontal and the vertical proportions so that the shape is even. So what we're going to do is use this tool, and we're basically just going to draw over one of these polka dots. And I can hit Control T to activate the free transform mode, and again hold Shift and change the size bigger and smaller while constraining the proportions, and just kind of rough it in to the size of this guy right here. Hit Enter to accept it. Okay, and I'll put this first one right down here where the first one is. Now from here I can sit and draw each of these circles manually, which is going to take a ton of time, and none of the circles are going to be even. Alternatively, I could sit and I could right click and duplicate these layers one by one and sit and position them in where they need to go, but again that's also going to take a long time. It's going to be a total pain because I got to sit and click and click and click and click. Really cool shortcut for duplicating layers. If you have a layer selected, in this case we have this guy here, it's just, I think it needs to be a little bit smaller. And I can just drop the opacity, go in there, just make sure this first guy is as close as I can get it. Now, if I hold Alt, click on the layer and drag, it'll make a copy of this layer and move it with my mouse, drag it with my mouse. So you'll see what this means right now. So I'm going to grab the layer, hold Alt, click and drag, and now you see I've made a copy and moved it at the same time. And it's made one right here, shape one copy. So now all I need to do is click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and so on and so forth, and just get every single one of these guys. They don't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect, because I'm going to go back later and I'm going to move these guys around and tweak them. I'm just getting them roughly in the right position right now. So, and there's a lot of them, so it's going to take a little bit of time, which is why you don't want to do this manually. Click and click. There's one here and here and here. And you can see them fading out a little bit. I'm not going to worry about that now. I'll do that in a later video. I'll fade all of these guys out. This guy's off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the pen tool. I'm going to press Control and click on it to select the vector. I can hit the move button and position it however I want. I'm just going to move this guy down here. So now we've got a layer group called polka dots. It contains shapes for all of these guys. If I turn that off, ooh, you can't see it because it's very dark. I'm having trouble clicking and dragging. Go there. Go. Okay. And you can see them all here. Okay. So now I want to grab all of these things and put them in this layer, or in this file. Okay, and we do that the same way we duplicate any file. You right click on it, you hit duplicate group because we want to take this whole group and duplicate it. Now instead of just hitting OK like we did before when I made the duplication of this blue piece here to make the white stripe, we go down to destination. And it says document GT3 Road America Practice, which is the name of this particular JPEG. I'm going to click the down button, and from this drop down I'm going to select the car and my user ID.psd, which is the file that we're working on. So we select that and we hit OK. Now if we go back here, we'll notice that there's a new layer group called polka dots, and it's actually right up here. It's absolutely tiny. You probably can't, it's probably so small you can't even see it, because this picture is very low resolution. But that's not a problem because of the way we've done this. We've used shapes instead of pixels. So what we're going to do, because if you notice this car is pointing this way, so the front of the car is here, the back of the car is here. In this particular case, the front of the car is here and the back of the car is here. It's backwards. And we're going to press Control T to open up the free transform. We're going to right click on it and we're going to hit flip horizontal, and this is going to take this entire image and flip the entire thing horizontally. So everything that's on the left side here is going to go on the right side here, and everything on the right side here is going to go on the left side here. So you right click, flip horizontal, and now the whole thing is flipped horizontally. Press enter to accept the change. Now we're going to take this layer group and we're going to put it where it belongs. Actually, we're not going to do that yet. Right now we'll size it in. So we'll hit Control T to free transform, and this is the power of using shapes and vectors over pixels. We're going to hold shift to constrain the proportions. We're going to click on the corner and we're going to drag to make it bigger, and you're going to see those circles look beautifully sharp. Okay. Nice and beautifully sharp and clean around the edges because they retain their vector quality, which is then filled in later. So we're just going to fill these in now, rough them in where they need to go. So the first one kind of ducks in under this little blue piece, and the last one goes all the way up to the seam right here. So we're going to make it nice and big. So rough it in like this. Now I want to rotate this a little bit because the original picture was off by a little bit. Okay, because this is shot at a little bit of an angle. So I think I'm going to try to rotate it backwards. So I'm going to move this side up and this side down. And this is really easy too. You also do this from the free transform where you press Control T. But instead of holding Shift and dragging like this to resize, you release Shift, and if you go right outside, you'll see it turns into a little bi-directional arrow with a curve. Now if you grab this, you can rotate the image. So we're just going to rotate it a little bit to fill it in here. And if you look up here, it tells you the amount in degrees that you've rotated. So if you watch this number right here as I rotate it, you can see it change. The more I move it, the more I rotate it. If I go like this, it's going to go all the way up to 90 degrees. Flip it around, it goes all the way up to 180 degrees, and then all the way back to 0, where we started. So we're going to go ahead and rotate it just a tiny bit to fill it in. And we're just going to kind of stuff it in there a little bit. Just like that, I think. Press Enter to accept the change. And there we go. Now we got a little bit of a problem because it's kind of going on top of things it's not supposed to be going on top. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take it, we're going to drag it into the left side layer group, and we're just going to tuck it underneath this white layer here. So it just goes and sits where it needs to belong. There we go. Now we go like this. We'll save it. We'll save it as a TGA, come back in here, refresh, and there you go, polka dots. And I think they should probably come forward a little bit. So that's easy enough to do. We just go down to our layer group, move the whole thing forward a little bit, maybe just rotate it a bit, just to kind of stuff them in. And I'll, on my own time, just kind of space these guys out a little bit more, just to make them look nicer. One thing I learned back in art school when they were teaching us drawing was that it's more important to make something look correct than to be accurate. So if you're drawing something, it's, for example, a table, if you draw it 100% faithfully and it looks really wrong, that's the incorrect way of drawing it. But if you draw it not 100% faithfully, but it looks right, that is the right way of drawing it. And I think that methodology, I think you should apply to this as well. If you do it 100% faithfully and it looks wrong and it looks really bad, then was it really worth doing it if it doesn't really look good, even though it's 100% faithful? I'll leave that question up to you guys. It's a little bit of a philosophical one. In my personal opinion, I'd rather have something that looks good than is 100% faithful. But that's just me. So we will save it, reload it, and there we go. So you can see things are getting distorted around here. I'll have to go back in and tweak these around a little bit just so they're not all messed up. And I think I'm just going to space these guys out. I'll do that on my own time. It's just because it's lots of tedious nudging things around. Basically select a circle, move it, select a circle, move it. And that's not going to make for good watching. So I think that's all I'm going to do for today. I'm going to start encoding and then go to sleep. And maybe I'll upload this guy tomorrow morning, so hopefully it should be up by tomorrow afternoon. It's the 4th today, so maybe the 5th, noonish, sometime it might go up. And so what did we learn today? Other than I like tequila, we've learned, not a whole lot, I don't think. We've learned how to use, well, we've learned a little bit. We've learned how to use action groups, which is going to make your work a lot easier. We've learned how to use shapes, tools, and constraints proportions. We've learned how to free transform and resize and rotate things. And we've learned a little bit of a cheaty way to duplicate shapes on cars. If you can find one of those Andy Blackmore spotter's guide pictures of cars, those can make your life easier. I've actually done it before. You can just trace stuff right on those cars, especially if it's the same car, and then just paste it right on here, and sometimes it looks just dead on. So with all of that said and done, thanks for watching, and now we'll see you guys next time. Bye.